When people hear the name Campbell Bridges, they usually get the short version. He discovered Tsavorite. He helped bring Tanzanite to the world. He was murdered in Kenya. All of that is true, but it flattens a life that was much stranger, harder, and more obsessive than the clean jewelry industry summary makes it sound. Bridges was not just a gem dealer or a lucky prospector. He was the kind of field geologist who built his life around the belief that if the Earth showed him one clue, he could follow that clue across borders, politics, animals, violence, and time until it paid off. He was Scottish-born and spent much of his life in Africa, eventually building a career that moved through some of the most volatile and difficult gem country on the continent. By the late 1960s, he was already involved in East African stones at a serious level. He was the first to bring Tanzanite to the United States, and later reporting described him as a pioneer in helping introduce Tanzanite to the international jewelry market. That matters, because Campbell Bridges was not just a man who found stones. He understood something equally important, which was that a gem does not really enter history until someone can identify it, name it, place it, and convince the wider world to care. The turning point came in 1967. In northeastern Tanzania, Bridges found strange nodules containing bright green grossular garnet. The discovery was unlike anything known in that color for grossular at the time, and the find shocked the gem world because green was not what people expected from garnet. This is one of the reasons his story matters so much. He did not merely uncover a pretty stone, he upended expectation. Garnet was supposed to live in the red family in the public imagination. Bridges found a garnet that burned with a pure electric green and forced experts to rethink what garnet could be. But discovery did not immediately turn into success. Mining the material in Tanzania became impossible after nationalization. Later reporting from the Bridges family says the first discovery in Tanzania effectively went nowhere because a mining permit could not be secured. That could have been the end of the story. For most people, it probably would have been. But Bridges thought geologically, not bureaucratically. He believed the gemstone-bearing belt did not stop at a political boundary just because a map said so. So he followed the rock belt north, into Kenya, looking for the same geological signature on the other side. That decision is really the heart of his legend. He was not a man waiting for permission from history. He saw a pattern in the earth and trusted it. By mapping the rocks across local deposits, he was able to locate the green garnet-bearing ground in Kenya by 1970. One of the early landmark finds came from Bridges's GG3 mine. This was the moment when the story changed from brilliant but frustrated discovery to something more dangerous and more permanent. In Kenya, he finally had ground he could register, work, and defend. The stone itself still needed a name. Bridges worked with Tiffany and Company in the early 1970s, and the gem was named Tsavorite after Tsavo, the region associated with the national parks on the Kenya-Tanzania border. Tiffany Advertising in 1974 publicly credited Bridges with the discovery when introducing the gem to the market. This part is easy to underestimate, but it was huge. A gem can be geologically real and commercially invisible. Naming it well and launching it through Tiffany turned Tsavorite from a field discovery into a luxury object with a mythology. Bridges knew the bush. Tiffany knew desire. Together, they created a gemstone identity that stuck. And still, the glamorous version leaves out the actual life he was living. The East African bush was not a romantic backdrop. It was the workplace. Bridges began by living in a treehouse to protect himself from wild animals and used a python to guard gemstones because many people feared snakes. Later reporting says he spent nights in a treehouse, used a python to watch over his cache, and chased away marauders trying to poach from his caves. Another account adds a detail that sounds almost fictional, but appears in museum reporting from his own later recollections. A leopard would sometimes enter his treehouse and eat on his bed, then prowl below when he returned at night. That was the world he chose to keep going back to. The mine most closely associated with his legacy became the Scorpion mine. Bridges found major material there in 1980, and over the next 4 decades it became the world's most prolific producer of fine Tsavorite. The mine's characteristic saddle reef structure, a folded geological form, helped explain its rich and consistent production, and the Bonanza Tunnel yielded some of the finest pockets the world had seen. This is where the Campbell Bridges story stops being only about luck or bravado. He clearly had both, but he also had technical skill. He was reading structure, formation, pressure history, and continuity in the rock. The gem world remembers the green. The deeper truth is that he earned that green by understanding the ground beneath it. There is also a reason Tsavorite became so important beyond its rarity. It is a stone whose color and clarity can rival emerald without the treatment issues often associated with emerald. And anniversary coverage has emphasized the extraordinary, clean, vivid stones that came from Bridges' family production. In other words, Bridges did not just discover a new green gem. He discovered one that could challenge old assumptions about what a top-tier green stone had to be. That gave his work a subtle edge. Emerald had history, royalty, and prestige. Tsavorite had freshness, fire, and a kind of defiant purity. It was a younger stone, but it was not trying to imitate emerald. It was trying to become its own category. Then the story darkened in the most predictable and brutal way possible. Valuable ground attracts pressure. Family accounts say Bridges had spent years fighting a group he believed was trying to force him off his land, and that after mining officials upheld his rights, the dispute escalated into intimidation, roadblocks, harassment, and death threats. Court reporting later described tensions between Bridges and local small-scale miners who viewed him as an outsider licensed to exploit mineral wealth on land they considered theirs. Those are not identical framings, and it is worth keeping both in view. One is the family's account of organized intimidation. The other is the court's description of a local conflict over land, access, and power. Together, they show how combustible the situation had become. On August 11, 2009, it exploded. Bridges, his son Bruce, and Kenyan colleagues had just left a police station after asking for help when they were attacked on the road. Reporting from the Times says a mob armed with clubs, spears, bows, and arrows killed him near Voi. Bridges died of stab wounds. Bruce survived, as did others in the vehicle. It is one of those endings that feels both shocking and completely in line with the life he had lived. Campbell Bridges had spent decades holding ground in a place where beauty, danger, and territory were always tangled together. In the end, the same world that made his name killed him. The legal aftermath was slow. In 2014, 4 men were sentenced to 40 years each after being found guilty of killing Bridges in the 2009 attack. The judge said that even if Bridges had been a trespasser, the accused had no right to take the law into their own hands, and the court's framing reflected the deeper tensions over land and mining access in the area. That does not erase the family's belief that bigger interests were behind the violence, but it does show how the Kenyan court officially framed the crime. Either way, justice came years later, and only after the kind of delay that turns every conviction into a partial answer rather than full closure. What remains now is his legacy, and it is larger than one mine. The unveiling of the Lion of Marilani, donated in his honor by Bruce Bridges and partners, framed the gem as a tribute to the man who discovered Tsavorite in 1967. The Bridges Company still operates the Scorpion mine, and anniversary exhibits have displayed some of the earliest Tsavorites Campbell found and some of the finest later stones from his collection. So the ending to his story is not only murder, court records, and a road outside Voi. It is also this. The green stone survived him. It entered museums. It entered the market. It outlived the ambush. Campbell Bridges spent his life proving that a discovery is not finished when you find it. It is finished only when the world can no longer pretend it is ordinary.